Fellow councilors, to my left, Councilor Tara Jacobs. Next to her, Paul DiPaolo, Terry Kennedy, and Eileen Duff. And to my right, Marilyn Petito Giovanni. At this point, I'm going to read a letter dated February 7th, addressed to the Governor's Council. Dear councilors, I'm pleased to nominate Francis Kenneally to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Sincerely, Maura Healy. So at this point, I know you have a lot of distinguished people here. You have a pretty amazing witness list, so we'll hear from them first, and I'll go in the order that you gave me, because you got all, this is like an all-star panel. I don't want them to be mad at me. This is your list. First, we'll hear from the Honorable Frank Gaziano. There he is. Good to see you, Judge.
Good to see you, Counselor. Where should I sit?
You can stand, you can sit, whatever you like.
Got already with the get appointed, you know.
PTSD. Let me thank the council for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Frank Kenneally. Now, my testimony is based upon over 30 years' experience with Frank Kenneally. I met Fran early in the 1990s when I was a new clueless lawyer. The most striking part of those early days is that Fran at that time treated me the exact same way he treats me now as a senior member of the SJC. Every single phone call that I made to Fran about immunity petitions, gatekeeper petitions, full court appeals, began with, how can I help you? Not as hollow platitude. He provided welcome, well thought advice to anyone who called, no matter where you were, position on the court, or your newness as a lawyer. Now, I want to discuss 4 qualities that speak to Fran's qualifications for the district court bench. First is his competence. For many years, I've watched Fran handle a wide variety of complex legal issues, criminal cases, civil cases, judicial discipline. He has provided guidance in these areas to SJC justices and countless members of the bar. The work is not well known to the public, and often we come across tricky legal issues that require further briefing or remand to the trial court. When we discuss our cases amongst judges and we come across one of those issues, we all stop and say, let's ask Fran. We count on his legal advice. One notable example of a case that he worked with me, myself, and Chief Justice Gantz and Special Master Brian O'Connor, navigating complex litigation and reporting requirements over the prison population during the COVID-19 crisis. He has a solid grasp and breadth of a wide variety of areas, criminal and civil. The second is his experience. I believe that his experience in the SJC would be an asset to the district court bench. Most district court judges do not have appellate experience, and Fran will add a valuable dimension to the bench. Issues arise that require Fran's wealth of experience, such as how and when to report a case to the appellate courts, how to properly frame an issue for later appellate scrutiny, what to do when a case is before the single justice, what type of factual findings are required, and what does deference to factual findings mean in a particular context. There's a need for, in that court, to include perspectives from a wide variety of lawyers and clerks. I think Fran will fill a need there. Third is his temperament. Fran has a long and distinguished history of great temperament in dealing with the court staff, lawyers, self-represented litigants, and public. I've known him for over 30 years, and I can state without fear of exaggeration, he is one of the kindest, most sincere individuals I've ever met, period. Lastly is humility. My view on humility has evolved over the years and hit my 20-year mark on the bench. That was important to start, and now I feel it's indispensable. To me, it means the ability to ignore the fact that everyone stands when you walk into a room and is required under pains of contempt to call you your honor. Humility is recognized in the very human fallibility of others, more importantly, in himself. Seek to improve every day and never forget that he's been entrusted by the governor and yourselves with a tremendous responsibility. In short, Fran will be a fabulous district court judge. I urge you to vote in his favor.
Thank you. Any questions of the councilors? Councilor Tara Jacobs.
Thank you. I really appreciate all that you shared. I wanted to ask, so as a new member, I'm not sure how long you've been at the SJC, and I'm wondering if you knew Brandon his first incarnation with the, when he first was at the SJC, or just more recently? Just get a sense of the depth of your experience with him.
Sure. So I've been on the bench for 8 years in the SJC, and before that, I was on the Superior Court for over 10 years. And I knew Fran in both those capacities as he worked for the full court. And then before that, when I was a practicing lawyer, starting in 1989, I met Fran and knew Fran because he was the clerk in the single justice session. And when you're a new lawyer, and you don't know what you're doing, and you try not to get blocked by people like Terry Kennedy, you rely on the clerks to tell you what to do, what to file, and to navigate things. And I would just call blindly the clerk's office because I had to go there for different things. He would answer the phone, how can I help you, and walk you through everything. And it wasn't just me, it was everybody. So that's how I got to know him way back in the 1990s.
I appreciate that added context. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Devaney.
How nice to see you. My proudest vote. Not only one, but in the Superior Court, the highest court. And also I want you and the Commission of Social Justice. And for people who don't know, that is a commission where we try to highlight Italian Americans, outstanding Italian Americans, and to fight the discrimination of Italians, the mafia and all of that. And we were just so delighted to have you. And I've watched you through the years, and unbelievable. Every vote that you've taken is with integrity. So having said that, I'd like to know what quality, out of all the qualities you've said about this nominee, what is the most important that he brings to the bench?
Thank you for your kind words. I think the biggest quality I could have in when people appear in front of you, given your lofty position and the amount of authority you have on the bench, it is that quality of empathy and humility, judge people as they come in on their worst day, and to recognize people, frankly, don't deserve a break, but most people do. And I think as I've seen Fran interact with people, self-represented people, people in our court, people in different situations, he has that quality about him to serve the public very well.
Well, I would say that your quality is integrity out of all of them, and to represent this nominee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions. Good to see you again. You're doing a great job. It's good to see you. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from the Honorable Serge Georges. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and members of the council. Good morning. This is probably one of the more important days of ever having to appear in front of you. I don't think I've had the pleasure of saying anything before Councilor Jacobs or Councilor DiPaolo, but I'm so honored that the nominee asked me to be here today. Yesterday, before coming here, Justice Gaziano suggested to me that, hey, why don't we meet to make sure that we don't say the same things and that we, and everything that I told him I was going to talk about, he talks about everything. So the pre-meeting accomplished nothing. So a lot of what you're going to hear is going to be just what was just talked about. But this is actually slightly different because all of you have been asked over the years to either write a letter of recommendation or recommend somebody for something. So this is, although I'm sure you have his application and his qualifications speak for themselves, this is slightly different. This is more of something that I'm saying to my friend about what a good man he is and how much he absolutely deserves this. I am incredibly protective of the community courts. The fact that some of you voted for me to be on the SJC, and I know that to a lot of people that is the highest court in this Commonwealth, and therefore this should be the honor of a lifetime. But I will tell you, and I don't mean any disrespect to your vote the last time, but having to preside in the community courts, particularly the court for the neighborhood I grew up in, is without a doubt the highest professional honor that I've ever had. And one of the things that makes me protective about that court is because there are a whole lot of people that come there that are just sinners. They are not criminals. And you need to have people in our community courts that serve on the bench that know the difference between someone who violated a criminal statute and someone who is a criminal. And that is really critical to understand, because most of the people that come through the community courts are not criminals. They suffer from things. They suffer from many of the things that we don't have. And you heard from Justice Graziano, not to say that he would give everybody a break just because they deserve a break, but more so because he knows the difference between the two, because he suffered through heartache and he suffered through sadness. And he knows that sometimes you just need a little bit of help to get along. And the fact that you're going to have somebody that will hold people accountable, but still give them an opportunity to earn a dismissal or to be better than they were before, is exactly who we should have on our bench. And you are never, ever going to come. You will find others that are just as good, but you will never find a better candidate for the community court than you have in Fran Kenneally. He is, without a doubt, one of the best people you'll ever meet. And I can't begin to tell you how he will be one of the best judges that you will ever vote for. I'm happy to take questions, but again, Justice Graziano stole everything. Councilor Devaney, I do want to mention that I am an 8th Sicilian. I am on my mother's side, and so to the extent that we're doling out honors to Sicilian justices.
My father was born in Sicily, so.
Well,
I want you to know, I wanted to recuse myself because I did not know that when I voted.
there is a large contingency of Haitian Sicilians roaming the world, and I happen to be one. So with that said, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, but that's what I got.
First of all, Justice, I want to make a commitment to you. If you and Graziano ever come again at a hearing, I give you my word, you're going first.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that I've been on here for 14 years. The dean's been on a lot longer. I've never seen a situation with 2 SJC justices show up to testify for witness, and that's pretty astounding. And
It is
It
astounding.
really says a lot.
Well, Councilor Kennedy, I would finish that thought and tell you that it says more about him than it does us.
I know that. You're right. That's my point. It really does say a lot about him. So I think it means a lot to everybody here. And, you know, it weighs a lot on me because I know you 2 guys can disbar me.
You know, that is within your ability, because it's only for cause that we do that, right? So.
Be in trouble.
I bet Councilor Devaney.
I just want to say, this is my lucky day to have 2 judges that I was so proud to vote for, and you have made me proud. And I just want to ask, you've been following him all these years. Tell me, is there one case that stands out that really impressed you?
Not necessarily a case, but a letter. You know, we have, every month, we have these monthly administrative meetings. And coming, you know, I joined the court during the COVID pandemic, so everything that we were doing was on Zoom, and so it was a new world for even the practitioners. And a couple of months or maybe a year or 2 into being on the court, during an administrative meeting that we had, Chief Justice Budd read a letter that was written in to the court, to her, from a practitioner that talked about how much Fran Kenneally made their lives so much better by having meetings ahead of time to go through how the technology worked, what the cues were going to be, all of the things they needed to know. And what it underscored was, it was somebody that it was important of the business of the court to be done, that he would go out of his way to go above and beyond to make sure that the attorneys and the experiences of the people that were coming to the court were as good as it can be if we were in person and live. That is what stands out to me.
If they all would do that, isn't that wonderful?
And imagine having someone in the chaos of a district court session where probation may not be ready, the clerks may not be ready, or the lawyers may not be ready, and all the alchemy that needs to happen in order for a case to be called, to have this guy running the show, game, set, match.
Pandemic, you people have been.
I can speak for the court and say for our court, it was Frank Kenneally.
Well, your testimony means a lot. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the council.
To see you again. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from the Honorable Maura Doyle.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Morning.
I have taken the liberty to write my remarks, but I will mention that I was not consulted to sit in with Justice Gaziano or Justice Georges. But now I know why. Anyway, I also wrote my remarks out because I have a lot to say about Frank Kenneally, and I certainly don't want to belabor it here at this meeting. So good morning to all of you. My name is Maura Doyle, and I am honored to appear before you this morning in support of the nomination of Francis B. Kenneally for a seat on the Massachusetts District Court. As I'm sure you know from reviewing Attorney Kenneally's judicial questionnaire, he has been an attorney for 37 years and a member in good standing of the bars of Massachusetts, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. His legal career includes extensive civil and criminal litigation in the state and federal courts, appellate practice on the state and federal level, real estate, residential and commercial practice, probate administration, estate planning, and of course, he appears before you this morning as the clerk of the Supreme Judicial Court for the Commonwealth for the past 10.5 years, where, as you have heard, he has distinguished himself as one of the most responsive, accountable, and professional public servants in the Commonwealth. Although I could speak to you in depth about his collaborative work with 25 Supreme Judicial Court justices and 5 Chief Justices, I prefer to speak to you today about Fran Kenneally, the man, the colleague, and my friend. I have known Fran for more than 43 years. We first met in the fall of 1980 when he came to work as a high school intern for then Representative and later Senator W. Paul White of Dorchester. I was also working part-time for Representative Paul White in the Judiciary Committee on a special joint commission on uniform sentencing and revision of the criminal statutes during my 3rd year at Suffolk Law School. My first impression? Wow. What a conscientious, hardworking young guy who was willing to do anything asked of him and to do it well. It was here at a very young age that I first observed Fran's innate passion to help others, his innate passion for public service. And I still clearly remember attending his graduation from Boston College High School in 1981 and joining his family and friends and State House co-workers to congratulate him and wish him well as he left to attend college at Fairfield University, where, of course, he honed his leadership skills as president of the Student Association. It was obvious to me that Fran was going to excel in whatever profession he chose as long as it was in furtherance of service to others. And so when Fran decided to become a lawyer, it was no surprise to all of us who truly knew him. For the work of all lawyers is basically to smooth out difficulties for our clients, to relieve their stress, correct mistakes, and in essence, to take up our clients' burdens and help them as they strive for justice. And that's why in 1997, after he finished law school He finished up with 6 years of practice in Baltimore. I jumped at the opportunity to hire Fran to the position of public service as an assistant clerk in my office. What most people, as well as attorneys, do not realize is that the Supreme Judicial Court is not just an appellate court, but it's also once was a high trial court. It is my side of the court, the county court, the single justice side of the court, that is the vestiges of the SJC's trial court function. It was while working in my office on the single justice side that I witnessed Fran's knowledge of the law, his trial experience, his procedural acumen, his superior writing skills, and most importantly, his passion for public service all converge. But you see, it's the single justice side of the court where busy and often stressed trial lawyers, like Justice Gaziano, for instance, not necessarily accomplished appellate lawyers, these stressed trial lawyers, as well as self-represented litigants, they seek emergency relief. And this is where Fran's inherent qualities of empathy, humility, and patience became readily apparent. I remember one specific instance very early on when a homeless, destitute man came to the clerk's office seeking help. He had been evicted, his belongings were all in storage, and he had no job. Fran sat with him, advised him as to what pleadings he should probably file. But then after learning that the man had been a painter, Fran gave him the phone number of a painting company in Dorchester where he might get work, get back on his feet, and hopefully be able to find and pay for housing. This is the man who's before you today. A man who is not only skilled in the law, but committed to helping those in society that others just don't see. On another occasion, a young lawyer, a new lawyer, came to my office seeking information and guidance. And a few days after Assistant Clerk Kenneally met with him, he received the following note. Dear Mr. Kenneally, I came into your office last week looking for information on limited assistance representation. And rather than sending me to another office or simply giving me a number to call, you took the time out of your busy schedule to look up the rule, make the necessary calls, and even walked me to where I needed to be. I truly appreciate all that you did to help me and the advice you gave me. Your kindness was refreshing. As a new attorney who is just beginning my career, I have not encountered many people who are ready to go out of their way to help as you did. It is through people like you that the integrity of our profession remains. I've also been of the mindset that whenever a person is being considered for the bench, it is the people who work for the nominee who should be consulted. This is how one, as you have done many times, I'm sure, learns the true demeanor of a judicial candidate. In anticipation of my remarks today, I asked several of my current long-term staff what it was like to work under Fran. And although they all mutually agreed that working with Fran on a day-to-day basis was a pleasure, I'd like to share with you one particular observation. Working for Fran Kenneally has been nothing short of exceptional. He never let any good deed or any job well done go unnoticed. He was always complimentary of hard work and made it a point to recognize it and celebrate it. He could handle any person from the most professional people who came to the counter to someone who was about to become homeless, and I got to witness his compassion for people as he offered guidance and assistance. He never treated anyone differently, from attorneys to a struggling man coming in with his children about to lose their home. He was always a courteous gentleman. And this is a quality of his I have always admired. It made me very proud to work for him and I am a better person for knowing him. End quote. So in closing, friends, in my personal and professional journey, I can't believe I'm,
You're making me cry.
oh, why I'm crying. Thanks. Know me too well. I thought it was just because I'm getting old and my right eye waters, but, Fran's and my personal and professional journey together, from his high school days to working shoulder to shoulder as clerks of the highest court of the Commonwealth, has been a privilege and a blessing. In my 43 years at the bar, I have never worked for any lawyer or worked with any lawyer quite like Fran. A man who possesses all the intangible qualities of intellect, compassion, patience, and humility. If appointed, I assure you that he will serve on the bench with honor, fair-mindedness, and authority without arrogance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Counselor Devaney.
You made me cry.
Good. Sorry, I don't look good.
No, your testimony means so much and your presence here too.
Thank you.
And you, out of all of the attributes that we could say, I think compassion, and I've said it many times, I won't vote for anyone if they don't have compassion. And he has it stamped in his forehead, so, and you brought it up, but you were his boss,
I was.
so you still had this, so, he was always there reaching out to people. Is there any incident that you can tell us about? That was one that we heard about, but, tell people, you know, to tell people what to expect, I think that's, you know, and you're afraid you don't know what's going to happen, and that's a big thing, yeah. So what would you say?
Other instances of compassion? I think at the death of Justice Gantz, who both Fran and I were very close to and enjoyed working with. They're cut from the same cloth, and the compassion that he showed Justice Gantz's family on that loss, the compassion that he has shown other people in our offices who have lost family members, you know, is outside the practice of law. He takes himself everywhere he goes, Counselor. And as I think one of my staff mentioned, it doesn't really matter whether you're a justice of the Supreme Judicial Court, whether you're the clerk of the court and he's an assistant clerk, whether you are a homeless person, whether you are a co-worker. He does not discriminate. He just kills everyone with kindness. And, but he's not a pushover. He's very deliberative. He's very thoughtful in his dealings. But I could think of probably a lot more instances.
No, that means a lot, and I don't separate the person from the public. That's the way he treats people from her in his personal life. And as far as Justice Gantz, I personally had a wonderful relationship with him, and what a loss. And he would take as much time with me, who am I? But he would take time, and I could maybe be half hour with him, and someone would say, you have to come out, Judge, and wait a minute, but that's what I found. And that's what you see in here.
They are exactly alike in that regard.
That's wonderful. Your testimony means a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much, Counsel.
We have one more witness, and that will exhaust the list. Former sheriff, former Superior Court judge, my good friend, Bob Rufo.
Thank you very much, Councilor Iannella and members of the council. I wanted to just very briefly thank this body for giving me the opportunity twice to serve the Commonwealth as the Justice of the Trial Court for 24 years. My brain fried a few years ago when I turned 70, but I still have a little fight left in me. At the first instance that Fran mentioned to me, which was about 2 years ago, and I met him probably back around 2010-ish, so I didn't know him as long as Mara did. Ralph Gantz got me involved in too many committees on the SJC while I was trying to be a judge. It was attorney conducted here, the Jury Management Advisory Committee, the list goes on. But I had a chance to work with him in my capacity as a judge to get information and to work on these committees, which really impressed me, as all of us have already said, with his passion and his diligence and his temperament. Now, I mentioned the word temperament because as a new judge, he has to go to new judge school. We all had to do that. And there's a course in new judge school, and I mentioned this to Fran the other day. It's called judicial equanimity, because we wanted to make it sound good. But equanimity really is about temperament. And I know right now, I can say this with confidence, that Fran will get an A in that course because he already has the temperament and the ability to act responsibly under stressful circumstances, which oftentimes a judge, he or she, finds himself to be in. So that's all I wanted to offer to you, Councilor Iannella, and members of the council, that he has the ability at this moment to maintain that judicial temperament that people need when they enter the bench and take on the responsibilities as a judge of the trial court. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Councilor Devane.
Change, you look great.
I'm old.
My proud 2 votes that I had for you, and I want to thank you for all your service. And
It's 1996 and 2004, and Councilor Iannella was here for both of those. I'm not going to tell you how old he is.
Come on, come on.
thank you, your testimony.
Thanks,
Hold on. Councilor Ferreira has a question.
I just want to thank you for your service and from, I took the ride from Falmouth to here just now. So I appreciate your ride from Cape Cod.
Ferreira's my counselor.
Now, your phone call the other day was very good. It was your input. Thank you, sir.
He's a great man.
Thank you. That will exhaust the folks in support. Is there anyone in opposition to the appointment of Fran Kenneally? There being no one in opposition, I'll close that portion of the hearing. And at this point, we'll give you the floor, and you can tell us why you think you should be a judge of the district court.
Thank you, Councilor Iannella. I'd like to introduce.
Also, excuse me, you can also introduce your friends and family who have not already.
Thank you very much. With me are my daughter Emily and my daughter Caroline and my brother Paul Kenneally. I also want to say that both my wife Kathy and my daughter Kate are sick and couldn't be here today, and I'm very sorry for that. For them, it's a bitter disappointment because for the last month or so, I've spoken of all of you so much. She thinks you're family. So, and that's, but she's watching. They're both watching. My son John lives and works in New York City, and he could not be here. I also want to recognize, of course, all my friends from the Supreme Judicial Court who are here. I'm very grateful for their support today. I won't name all of you, but I thank you for being here. Thank you. My heartfelt thanks go out to Justice Frank Gaziano, Justice Serge Georges, Clerk Doyle, and Judge Rufo. Thank you very much for being here. The best years of my professional life have been spent at the Supreme Judicial Court, working with the most dedicated people I know. Chief Justices, Associate Justices, and the extraordinary staff. I extend my sincere thanks to Councilor Iannella for hosting me, and to you, the members of the Governor's Council, for your kindness and courtesy during this process. I appreciate the hard work of the Council's Administrative Office, Valerie McCarthy, Sonia Altamirano, and Aaron Thomas. I'm grateful to Governor Maura Healey for my nomination. I'm also grateful to Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll. Throughout this process, I have been so fortunate to receive expert guidance and support from the Governor's Legal Counsel, Paige Scott Reed, and Deputy Legal Counsel, Dara Kesselheim. I'd like to recognize the extraordinary efforts of Chair Amin Thomas and the members of the Judicial Nominating Commission. I'm also grateful to Marty Healy and the members of the Joint Bar Committee for their support. I humbly recognize that no one gets here on their own. I've been carried here on the shoulders of so many people. I have confessed to some of them and also to some of you that I approached this moment with some apprehension because I have never had a public job interview, especially one that is streamed live. The advice I have received has been consistent, clear, and very helpful. Be yourself, talk about your background and experience, and why you think your background and experience will make you a good judge in the district court. So in my brief remarks this morning, I would like to share how my upbringing has helped shape my values and how that informs how I treat people today. My growing up in a tinderbox row home in Dorchester was not always easy, especially for my parents. With 6 kids, their love and support shielded us from the harsh realities of life that can often disrupt childhood and adolescence. My mother, Claire, now 90 years young, is the strongest person I've ever met. Her grace in the face of tragedy, especially with the sudden loss of my brother Steve in 2004, and managing an often chaotic home, taught me the values of perseverance and patience. My father, Jerry, was the most caring person I ever met. What we lacked in resources, he compensated for with hugs. The difference in his adolescence and mine could not be more stark. When I was 16, I spent many carefree nights hanging at the Garvey Park in Dorchester with my friends from the Garvey Athletic Club. When my father was 16 and already orphaned, he spent many restless days at the Roberts Field in Dorchester trying to find a way to sneak into the Navy to join his brothers Joe and Fran. At 17, I was still hanging at the Garvey Park. When my father was 17, he was on a ship fighting in the South Pacific. I graduated high school and went away to college. My father never graduated high school, and after the war, went to work as a welder at the Four Rivers Shipyard in Quincy. From him, I learned the values of hard work, tolerance, and respect for all people. Particularly formative for me growing up was closely observing my parents in the early 70s during the busing crisis in Boston, a period of racial division, tumult, and violence. Despite these deep divisions, my parents made it very clear by their words and deeds that hate had no place in our house. Their influence and example inspired me in high school to join the Covenant for Justice and Equity movement in 1979 to help mend racial divisions in Boston. That influence guided me toward law and continues to motivate me today. When I look back at my legal career, it's not the steady stream of trials, depositions, and motions that motivated me. But it's those times when I felt that I truly helped people, whether it was dispensing legal advice to unhoused persons with mental health and substance use problems on the streets of Baltimore, or representing people facing criminal charges as a bar advocate through Suffolk Lawyers for Justice. I have worked for a civil litigation firm with a national practice, and as a solo practitioner with a local practice. It is my work as a solo practitioner that has best shaped how I help people in my current role and how I would help people in the future. I know what it is like to have to be in 3 places at the same time, to make payroll, and to be on the first name basis with everyone who works at Staples. These experiences have been critical to my work in the public sector, especially during my time as clerk of the SJC for the Commonwealth. Throughout this process, I have understandably been asked, why would you ever leave the rarefied air of the SJC to serve in the district court? Much of my work at the court is spent triaging, putting out fires and putting off for a short time the less urgent matters. In many of the motions that I decide and the disputes that I help resolve, it usually comes down to the parties seeking simple or complex procedural guidance, or lawyers and self-represented litigants in need of breathing room due to professional pressures, personal crises, or even the need to take a week off without having to worry about their cases. I am guided by simple unwritten rules. Don't elevate form over substance. If you help someone, never give the impression that you've done them a favor just for doing your job. Don't weaponize court rules and procedures to embarrass someone or deny them access to justice. Help everyone who needs it, whether they have a case with us or not. These simple rules would guide my service as a judge, and I will always have a deep and enduring appreciation for the indispensable role of clerks. In the district court, I know that I will have an infinite number of opportunities to help people who have trauma, mental health problems, and substance use disorders, and for selfish reasons. My deepest motivation stems from the loss of my brother Steve due to his mental health challenges and his son Connor, who we lost in 2015 during the opioid crisis on Cape Cod. I firmly believe, if asked, the intervention of a district court judge could have saved them. I would be honored to bring my passion for helping others and my compassion for those seeking justice to the district court. Thank you again for your time, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Councilor Duff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really a pleasure to see you, besides all the wonderful emails you sent us. But you have such a stellar reputation, and I've heard from people that literally I never hear from, singing your praises. So I don't have a lot of questions because frankly, pretty much everything I need to know about you, demeanor being one of them, I know. But I'd like you to share with us a little bit about the initiatives, the number of initiatives, the initiatives during COVID that you had to deal with, and how the use of technology in implementing that at the time, because I think our courts, and I know you were somewhat involved in it, but you know, we were in not just a local emergency, we were in a global pandemic. And I think people forget that. You know, and yeah, there were blips and things probably in some of the courts. I mean, we had a housing judge who actually kept the whole housing court open, but we had people criticizing because they didn't like how some of the stuff worked. The fact that it worked at all, the fact that you guys were able to implement it, to me is really heroic. And I mean that in, you know, I have a classic education like you do, you know, I mean heroic. I mean in that sense of what that word really is. So if you could share that with us, that's the one thing I'd like you to expound on.
Thank you for asking that question, because what it helps me do is shine a spotlight on the unsung heroes during the pandemic. And that's JISD, the Judicial Information Services Department, the people that equip us with the technology to do our jobs. We didn't miss a beat. And so they're the ones who equipped us with our Zoom licenses and our all of our technologies. So I'll be eternally grateful for them to allowing us to continue operations. I think there were many, many initiatives during the pandemic, and I was unaware of the letter that Justice George has read or talked about. Part of my goal in my job has always been, how can I diminish apprehension in anyone? So when the SJC wanted to be back in the building as early as possible, I think to send a message that we're back in business, I did hold about 70 meetings by Zoom with attorneys, and I even videotaped this amateur video to show them what it would be like walking into the new world after being away for over a year and a half.
Yeah.
So those sessions were extremely rewarding for me, because it was an opportunity to diminish apprehension. There were people who did not want to come back, were afraid to come back. It was just before, you know, the vaccines were as effective and pervasive. And so there was a lot of fear still. So to be able to use those as a vehicle to diminish fear among people was very, very rewarding. And what was best about it is we didn't force anyone to do anything. This hybrid model we came up with, if you were home and you wanted to argue from there because you felt safer, we accommodated that in the same case. If you wanted to come in, we had protocols set up to make you feel safe. So those sessions were very helpful in explaining to the parties coming in what we had done and how we were going to protect them if they chose to come in to see us.
Thank you so much, because it really goes down to the basic, and I know Justice George and I have talked a lot about this, access to justice. I know he chairs committees on that. But you know, we throw phrases around a lot, but justice delayed is justice denied, right? And the fact that you were able to be part of that team and lead that team, and thank you for acknowledging all those workers, because to me, honestly, it's something that people forget about. You know, we're past COVID now. The vaccines are pretty darn good if people get them. But it was really we'd never seen anything like it. And so thank you for sharing that, because it really, to me, was just a tremendous team effort at the very highest level of our court system to make this work. So thank you. I have no other questions.
Thank you very much. Councilor Terrence Kennedy.
Good morning again. I told you outside, I received countless letters from Judge Rufo had called me, Paul Dolly, Justice Paul Dolly called me yesterday. Sharon Casey, the clerk in Cambridge, former executive director of the JNC, texted me this morning. And everybody said the same thing. Is Kenneally going to be okay? And my answer was yes, he's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. And I'm not going to list them all. There were tons and tons of calls. I'm going to ask you a couple of practical questions that about the district court and Superior, but you're going to district court. That I'm seeing that I don't particularly like going on right now. And the one thing that we got out of the pandemic, the one good thing in terms of the court system was how fast they ramped up in terms of the technology in order to keep up with things. When the pandemic hit, if somebody had told me that I would be doing cases on Zoom, I would have said, "What's Zoom?" No, I had no idea what it was. And I would sit there and even after we were back to work a little bit, and I'd be able to do a pretrial in Plymouth in district court. I'd be able to do one in Newburyport. I'd be able to do one in Lowell, sitting at my desk. And I was doing work at my desk, all done with that at 10 o'clock, as opposed to driving around like a maniac and having judges mad at me because I'm 2 hours late. A lot of courts are doing away with that. I guess the rule basically leaves it up to the presiding judge in terms of lawyers being able to Zoom in. I know in Lowell, they don't do Zoom anymore. I know in the BMC, they don't do Zoom anymore. Isn't that going backwards? I mean, it seems like that was a really great advance in terms of efficiency.
I think it should be a sustained technology. It's the reason why I'm advocating for it to continue at the Supreme Judicial Court with our oral arguments. So there are some proceedings that absolutely make sense for Zoom and others that do not. I would draw the line at evidentiary hearings. But when it comes to a 5-minute pretrial hearing or talk about discovery compliance election, I think it's perfect for a Zoom hearing. And so I think more uniformity across the system would be.
That was my next question, is the lack of uniformity, because one court has this rule, one court has that rule, one court has another rule, because they basically left it up to whoever the presiding is in the district court. And when you're moving around, and they already have your seat wound up in Region 3 for you, the judge has already told me that they're very bad. It's the inconsistency makes it difficult for lawyers to figure out what they're supposed to do in a particular court, especially if it's a court they don't usually go to.
I can tell you what I would do as clerk of the SJC, and I do it now for those types of, we just had a battery of conferences by Zoom just last Friday in our murder cases. So it should be a tool that's continued to be used with uniformity. And I don't know what the answer is, but I do know.
How do we fix it? Do we talk to these guys?
Well, yeah, they might as well. I do think it's something that should be more uniformly.
Yeah, I think so. The other part of that equation is the defendant's present during court. Some courts are saying it's still okay if they're not there at a pretrial or a compliance and election date, basically an event where they're not really participating, let's say. It's not like a trial or a motion. I agree they have to be there. But, most of these people, if they have jobs and they start missing work because they go to court a lot, they're going to lose their jobs. And I think the one thing we want everybody doing is working, because that's one of the things that's going to keep them from coming back to court in a different case. How do you feel about the defendant being present on every single event? Because that's happening in some courts again now too.
Sorry to hear that. When I was a bar advocate, I routinely asked for my client's appearance to be waived to the next hearing, Your Honor, and it was routinely allowed in the BMC. So I'm sorry to hear that.
I mean, I go into some courts, my client's not there, the judge looks at me and says, "Have you been in touch with them?" Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And we move on, we do what we have to do. Other courts, where's your client? And once again, we have the issue with the inconsistencies there. I personally, unless there's something special going on with a particular case where probation wants to see him, he's on a GPS, he's doing drug testing, whatever, unless there's something specific going on, that there's no need for them to be there on a non-evidentiary date.
I shared with you my first unwritten rule, which is don't elevate form over substance. And to me, you're striking at form over substance here. It's something as someone that had to hustle as a solo, I get, I understand.
The other thing that you're going to be facing in post-pandemic, there was obviously a huge backlog in the district courts. I had a backlog myself of cases to catch up on. I'm just catching up now. I expect I'll be probably caught up by the end of the summer. I'm in court every day. I try cases all the time in the district courts, sometimes in the Superior Court, but I'm trying to get away from that and I won't work that hard anymore. But there's a big push on to move cases, time standards, time standards, time standards. I'm hearing it over and over and over and over and over. And a couple of things happen when you push time standards. One is it basically puts all the pressure on the lawyer who's trying to make a living and trying to juggle cases. You know, I tried a case in Plymouth 2 days ago, and I tried one yesterday in Haverhill. I'm all over the place, you know what I mean? And a lot of lawyers are. And it's difficult to just keep going from one to the other because judges want to move cases for the sake of moving cases. The other way they move them is they end up dismissing a lot of cases that maybe shouldn't be dismissed. I'll take it, you know, it's good for my client, but it's not necessarily the right way to run a criminal justice system, right? What's your view? What are you going to do when Chief Justice Forts is calls you up and said, Judge Kenneally, you've continued these 5 cases that are outside the time standards. What are you doing that for? You're not supposed to do that. How are you going to respond to that?
I'm going to ask her for the list of exceptions to those types of situations, because I certainly hope there are a list of exceptions. When
I don't think there's a list per se, but
what the exceptions are to that, to those time standards, because there should always be exceptions to time standards.
how about this one? How about I'm busy? How about I have a very busy practice and I just can't get them done within that time frame? Like, not just me, but the lawyer.
I deal with it all the time. That as a rationale for creating, as I say, breathing room in my remarks.
The reason that I'm gonna vote for you has nothing to do with this great resume you have, or the great witnesses that you had here today, or all the nice things I heard about you on the phone. The reason I'm gonna vote to you is you were incredibly nice to my daughter.
Oh,
So, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor DePaula.
Thank you, Counselor. Good morning. I enjoyed our conversation very much, and it affirmed, among other things, what I had already heard around your temperament. And I feel very good about your judicial temperament and our conversations around pro se litigants and even some of the anecdotes that were shared this morning. Along the lines of what Counselor Kennedy was just asking you about, in terms of the time and the pressure to move in district court, the anecdote we heard this morning about the gentleman who was destitute and you helped him pursue work opportunities, et cetera. As a district court judge, what do you feel the reality of the situation will be for you to be able to make those fine-tuned, tailored considerations amidst the pressure of the court, the workload?
to be honest with you, I think what's going to be difficult for me is to take the exact same approach that I use today when it comes to those situations. And there's a natural barrier in our clerks' offices. And the first thing I do when someone comes in for help is I remove the barrier. I come around and we sit down and have a conversation. Their dignity, there's respect in that moment. And I listen carefully. I can't replicate that in district court. And I don't know how I'm going to how I could possibly replicate that. But the spirit of it is there. I will find a way. The how I don't quite know right now. And I do know that there is pressure to move things along. I think you just have to find a way to move cases, but also not sacrifice fairness and not sacrifice someone's impression of their case before this judge in this court in this moment.
I want to ask you about your views on discretion, because I liked your answer on your application. And you asked rhetorically, to what end? To what end are we exercising our discretion? And you wrote that sentencing should be reflective and not reflexive. Could you expound on what you mean by that?
Sure. I don't do anything in my current job reflexively. I look at every motion, every case as a different case and a different set of facts, a different situation. So the same would go for sentencing. Take time to reflect, take time to look at the complete record, take time to listen, take time to receive letters from educators and employers, listen to counsel carefully, and always ask, to what end? What are the goals here? What are we trying to achieve for this person? For example, there's with someone with a job, with a Section 35 in the balance, a commitment, who also has a charge pending, put that person away, thereby jeopardizing the job and exacerbating the substance use problem, rather than maybe putting on conditions of release that address the problem on an outpatient basis, those types of situations.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you about tailoring conditions of release around particular individuals, and we had talked about that. Another thing I want to ask you about your response and discretion. That one of your goals would be to become expert in all statutes and SJC decisions regarding expungement and sealing. Could you
Yes.
explain why that's important to you?
Yeah, it's an area that's complex, and we have experts in the room who have written about it. And it's an area that I would really like to become expert in, because I think that a person through that statute can get a new lease on life, whether it's housing, whether it's employment. And I really, in addition to diversion and those other remedies, I see that as a key. As long as it complies with the statute and the decisional law of the SJC, as a key to giving people a new lease in many ways. So I'd like to explore it very, very, very carefully.
Well, I appreciate your perspective on every issue we talked about. We had touched on a couple other things as well. I love talking asbestos with someone who's dabbled in that practice area.
Yeah.
We touched on the legacy of the Gantt study, the Harvard study on racial disparities in sentencing. As I said, I very much enjoyed our conversation. Your reputation preceded you. Your home counselor was on the phone right away, and my phone's been blowing up quite a bit regarding governor's council work lately, but calls about you were part of it, and were the more pleasant calls I was receiving, so it's great. So I have no further questions. I think you're going to be an outstanding.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one more comment?
Real quick.
Two things. One is, as I was sitting here, I got a text from Judge Farrell telling me I better be nice to him. But I too got a call from your counselor as well as soon as you were nominated. And he's been extremely supportive, and he had already twisted my arm before I walked in the door, so.
Thank you, Counselor Tara Jacobs.
Good morning, it's still morning. So it's good to see you. I will lead off by just echoing the support of your counselor and how much that means to all of us. We had a really great conversation. I really appreciated you coming out, sitting down with me, and we talked about so many things. And I already, we had met already in your role at the SJC, and I do receive your emails with the updates on the docket and the schedule. And so I already felt like, to some degree I knew you, but really that conversation, I got to know you in such a deep and personal way, and it was really meaningful.
Thank you.
For me, and really, I walked away feeling, kind of echoing what was already been said in this room today, but in terms of your demeanor, who you are, background you bring, some of what really stuck with me was your persistence and the way in which you kind of just marched out into the world to kind of carve your path. Is so inspiring. It's rare to see someone who really has just grabbed life and literally knocked on doors to find opportunities. And I think it says a lot about who you are and how you live life. And clearly the relationships with the witnesses we've had today and the letters, emails, phone calls, been receiving, the relationships that you've established are just filled with the same tone and language about who you are, which just speaks to you're just consistently this person who I'll even refer to a call I had with Judge Ireland, who sang your praises at length, but echoed a lot of what your witnesses shared today in terms of you being such a thoughtful and smart and compassionate person. He talked about how regardless every walk of life, the people you encounter, you show up in the same respectful and just compassionate way. And he alluded to something we talked about at length, which is the focus you brought to ensuring you had a diverse staff and the steps you took. So I want to actually give you an opportunity to talk about that, if you don't mind, and share what he's referring to and what we discussed, but also, so share that, but if you could also then, how that might reflect in how, as a district court judge, that perspective, that focus might reflect back into how you conduct yourself as a judge.
Thank you. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I firmly believe that with respect to my office, I don't have a large staff, but in the hiring decisions that I've had to make over the last few years, that has been a chief goal of mine. And we serve a diverse population of people that come into the clerk's office. And frankly, it's as simple as having them come in and feel more comfortable at seeing that there are people who look like them that work in the clerk's office, and that we all don't look alike and we all don't think alike. And it's a better office for it. Much better office for it. So in terms of a district court, being a district court judge, certainly I would continue to be driven by those types of passions. And I would also hope, though, that the way that I'm able to approach people that work with me at the court and people that come into the court can somehow be conveyed from the distance and height of a bench. And that's one of the things that I think I'll have to struggle with at first, but I think I'll find my way.
So that you almost created the perfect segue for my, it's almost like we scripted this and we did not. But I wanted to ask you to reflect on what you think, both from the standpoint of the strengths that you'll bring from the experiences you've had, but the challenges you anticipate facing entering into this role as a district court judge.
Sure. I think the challenges are going to be more for me tied to the volume of work. I'm not afraid of work. I work a lot of weekends at the court, but I think the volume of cases, as Councilor Kennedy talks about time standards and moving cases along, I think that's going to be something I'm going to have to adjust to and figure out how to manage. So I think that would be the first challenge I'm going to face, I believe, as a judge, and try to do that without sacrificing fairness, without letting it feel, leaving the bench and making people feel as if they weren't heard. That to me would be very unfortunate. I think regardless of the outcome of the case, as long as people feel like they were heard and that there was empathy and a connection made, I think that's essential.
I agree, it fully is. I think that has everything to do with how someone feels about the outcome, good or bad, whether one in their way or not, if they feel seen and heard, respected by the court. I think it's foundationally just so important. So I appreciate you saying that. You know, I could ask you all kinds of things, but I really just, I walked away feeling so good about you as a person, your qualifications, and so I'll leave it there. I don't feel the need to ask you further, but just I hope it's been a good experience going through this process, and
Thank you.
it's great to see you today.
We'll continue the conversations by the time if you want.
Thank you, Councilor Ferrara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Nice talking to you over the past couple of weeks. I've always enjoyed getting your newsletters on Sundays, your work Sundays, telling us what the SJC is doing. Your reputation's phenomenal. It's kind of weird to get calls, which I get a lot of calls too. People going, is he gonna be okay? What do you mean he's gonna be okay? It's like, I've passed judgment on over 250 judges, and this is one of the best resumes I've ever seen. I think you should have applied for the SJC as well. Maybe it's not too late, maybe next time. But I got calls, from your host counselor here, Judge Rufo, Marty Healy from Mass Bar, Sharon Shelfer Casey reached out to me this morning, Kevin O'Leary. I got tons of calls. Everyone says great things. But your resume is incredible, because it's not very often we get somebody who puts down 45% of your work was civil, 45% of your work was criminal, and you've done every kind of case I can imagine, and 10% of it was probate court as well. You're gonna make a stellar judge. Incredible. And just one thing, sometimes I don't know if you noticed, but sometimes Councilor Kennedy uses this as a sounding board for bigger things. But one thing I want to ask you about, so I got a date in Brockton, on the trial, and they said 11 o'clock, which I thought was great. So that you don't have to worry about parking, everyone gets here at 9 o'clock. Do you see that as something that should be rolled out? Do you have any thoughts on that? Different times, a rolling schedule?
I've done it. I've done it at the court on a very micro level though. But one thing we did during the pandemic, and we continued after the pandemic, is to give attorneys staggered times to come to court. And what we try to be thoughtful about is if an attorney is coming from Western Mass, they go on at 11 or 11:30. If someone's local, they may be the 9 o'clock call. Somebody works at the Attorney General's office, for example. But I'm a firm believer in it. I've used it and it works really well. Yes.
I'm a big fan, and everything that Councilor Kennedy talked about as well, not having a defendant in every pretrial, I think it all makes sense. So, congratulations in advance. I think you're gonna do pretty well in this room, and I think you're gonna be a great judge. Apply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Think about the SJC next time.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Devaney.
Thank you for all the time you afforded me. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure.
At the diner. Tell me, what's your most rewarding case looking into there? And I love you even civil and criminal. That's really important to me.
I mean, the most rewarding case, I think, at least within recent memory, is the case that Justice Gaziano alluded to earlier. It was called the Committee for Public Counsel Services and the Mass Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers versus the Chief Justice of the Trial Court, SJC 12926. And this is a case that was, we issued our first COVID order on March 13, 2020. And within 10 days, that case was fully briefed and argued before the full court in a 4.5-hour oral argument, which was the first time it's ever happened in the court's history. And what was important about the case is that at the time we were sitting on a powder keg because we had pretrial detainees and people in the DOC and people that work in those facilities who were vulnerable to COVID. And so this was an extraordinary effort, not only the justices, but the parties and the master to try to get our arms around that potential powder keg. And when this was argued on March 30, 2020, the court issued its opinion. Justice Gaziano was the author 4 days later, maybe even 3 days later, which decided the rights of pretrial detainees and also those under the supervision of the Department of Corrections. And what was remarkable about it was the court appointed a special master, Brian O'Connor. Brian O'Connor, who along with other attorneys in his office, Josh Levy and Rob Roberts, compiled data from the sheriffs about what was going on in their facilities, all in an effort to keep people safe and protect them from disease and sickness and death. And the attorneys with the special master O'Connor from Ropes and Gray easily spent thousands of hours at no cost to the Commonwealth for this effort. And they would send me their weekly reports, I think, for the next year and a half, every week. And they would come in at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, midnight, 1 in the morning, and I would get them out to the world when I got them. So to me, that's the case that stands out the most because it called on the best of everybody in the system. And that's what happened.
Well, I was amazed at how many rape cases you had. Could you tell us about that pedophile priest?
Which case is that? I'm sorry.
That was, do you remember it?
No, that might be counsel.
Okay, wait a minute. That was, I'm sorry. That was, I'm sorry. You had, yeah, the one to follow that and talk about it. Yeah.
The one we just talked about, and there were a few others they don't come to mind right away, but we covered a lot of ground.
Right, right. Well, you know, the thing is that that I saw in you that you know, you educated people so that they would come in, because people are afraid when they come into a court, they don't know what to expect, and you did.
Yes.
So, what do you feel, I mean, is there anything that you feel that you have to learn now to take this new step as a judge?
In all humility, I have a lot to learn. I think my learning curve is going to be an interesting one. I think in areas such as sentencing, it's an area that I really need to learn more about, and just the mechanics of certain things. But I'll spend the time necessary to do it.
No, I've got a lot of calls too, and Judge Mader and Judge Holgian said wonderful things about you. Everyone says the same thing about you. You're humble, you're unassuming, and you really go that extra mile to help people. So, when you have applied before,
Yes.
and tell me about that. How did that go?
It was a wonderful process. I applied a couple of years ago. And I think I got pretty far in the process, but I think at the end of the day, you know, the numbers just weren't there, but I was treated extremely well by everyone in the process, and
I've heard it so often, everyone thinks they got it and they don't.
you remind me of something Chief Justice Ireland said to me one time, many years ago, because he would push me from time to time to do this. And he would say to me, don't be afraid of no. Don't be afraid of no. Keep going if it doesn't work out the first time.
Oh, I'm glad you did.
Thank you.
Because unfortunately, in that administration, so many good people didn't get appointed. And you know, the sad thing is when they don't, because I know I talk with these lawyers in my district, and they see who got appointed, and you know it isn't someone really qualified, that they won't apply again. So I want to just say that. Thank you. We wouldn't have had you come into the court system, and the people that support you, I have that I've known decades, you know, and so do you think there should be any changes in the court that you're going to? Does it need some changes?
I think there's a bit of a crisis I'm learning about, in that the pandemic caused a real hit to the number of clinicians and doctors available for Chapter 123, Section 12, 15B, and 35 hearings. And they've dropped precipitously. And so judges I really feel bad for a lot of district court judges who are there at 3:30, 4 o'clock, need a bed. They need someone to do an evaluation and they can't find someone to do it. And so it's a real crisis right now. And the system has to find a way to get people back. But I think that a lot of clinicians found it much easier, and doctors, to conduct business by Zoom. And they can do just as well with that as their vehicle for making a living.
I'm concerned about that we don't have places for people who are drug addicted, and they're not criminals. I mean, these people are just, I've had two of my friends that lost sons to drugs, and I don't know why, how they got involved, but they're good people. So how can we help these people if we don't have places to send them?
It's a crisis because oftentimes I've talked to district court judges who are really frustrated about the lack of a bed, and they just try to patch together as best they can and triage and maybe find an outpatient place or even a family member that can keep them safe.
Well, I'll tell you, going to the drug graduations, what a wonderful program that is.
Yeah.
And to see these people, all ages, that have gone through the program and now they're clean. I sit in the back and tears come to my eyes. It's really an amazing program. So if we could have more of those, you know.
I think the expansion of the specialized courts, the drug courts, would be a big help.
Yes, I've gone to the drug courts. I think it's important.
I saw their effectiveness when I was a bar advocate in South Boston. Didn't have sessions,
You think
drug court.
there's racial discrimination in the courts?
Well, that's a great question. I could talk for hours about this issue.
You know what, when times, they're gonna time me.
Well,
So the thing is that I go out to the prisons and I've met with these inmates and they're petitioning for commutations. And my one problem is a lot of them don't have advocates. So how many more there that are wrongly sentenced And that's the thing. The other thing is, on the parole board, I don't think anyone's looking, we need to increase it. We only have 7, 9. Because, these people, I mean, are going from North Conway to Yarmouth, and it's impossible to do the job. And they have to have hearings, and they have to have timely, to have decisions, to have timely decisions. And so we're not having life hearings that we should, commutation of hard hearings, because they're stressed out so much. So I'm hoping, I'm pushing for legislation that they will add to the parole board. It's so needed. So I don't know if you're involved in any of that.
I'm not in that effort.
But it's a whole lot of things. But, you know, the drug addiction is something that we haven't won that war, that's for sure.
No, I give a lot of credit to the district court, chief justices, Justice Force, Justice Dolly, for expanding those, and I think we could do more work along those lines.
Well, I really don't have any other questions. I'm the last one, so the questions have been asked, but I am, I couldn't be happier that you applied, and this is a new administration, and I'm so happy that we're getting people who are qualified, who are experienced. They're not, it's not a political person jumping the line. I've seen it, and it's so nice to have you, and thank you again for applying. And I know you're going to, you know, make us proud, and I wish you all good luck.
Thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Good morning. I don't have any questions. We had a lengthy conversation. You know, clearly from the people who spoke on your behalf, and some really impressive people, the calls that I got. You're a real decent guy. Your job at the SJC was about helping people. And I heard that today. You clearly have the compassion, the judicial temperament, your demeanor. I think you're going to be a great addition to the court system. And next week or the week after, whenever your name comes before the council, I'd be more than happy to support you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. That will conclude the hearing today. Thank you.
Yeah.